Every corner hides a secret, every spell contains power. Join Lilith in delving into this magical world full of mysteries. Are you ready to uncover the truth? Chapter 7 She Kidnapped the Time Elite. I'm not kidding. She just upped and kidnapped one of the greatest sorcerers alive. With nothing but an ominous statement and a grin to match. 1 second she was giving me a stack of books that had my will to live shrink to an all-time low, then she disappeared, reappearing in front of him with a different grin, and repeating the action, only taking him with her. The elites went into chaos, not even a second later, simply trying to find her. Miss H did bother to pause in her panic to tell me to go to my room. With all the books. So, ready to accept my fate of an honorable, but meaningless death, I took the 6 trips that the mountain of books demanded of me and piled them on my bed. My room being covered in glass and all. With a sigh, my shoulders sagging and body draining of all hope, I took in the mess, wishing it away, but sadly, it remained. Praying that I wouldn't have to make this a habit, I rolled up my sleeves and grabbed the broom in my closet. Halfway through my second break, a soft knock came from my door. And, horrifying, as it was to find no one anywhere near the hall I happened to be placed in the middle of, I was grateful to find 2 large barrels leaning against the wall. With something to put the growing pile in, I heaved a heavy sigh, not even partially done, but far too tired to bring myself to do any more. It had been hours, but I could hardly see the difference. So, not caring enough, I dropped the mountain of books in the only part of the room free of glass. The corner quickly filled, my stomach roaring and body aching. Despite the agony that was being awake, I thought of the one thing that made all this worth it. Having my bed free of books. Being able to sleep. The fact I was a creature that slept to begin with. With a blissful sigh, my priorities now straight, I finished the last stack and properly fell face first into my bed. Immediately falling asleep, that ominous statement of hers the last thing to run through my mind. Oh, and kid, I'd keep the heat running through you don't want to see what happens to heroes. Once upon a time, there was a teacher. One who had never shown up on time, and so, thinking she was safe, the unsuspecting girl slept in a little too late. The rush of the day before far too straining. On that day, the one day she had barely missed the bell, the wicked teacher had shown up not only on time but early. Now, the innocent girl deprived of sleep and edible food was harshly scolded for daring to do such a bold thing. Apparently, disrespecting not only her teachers, school, and parents but the gods themselves. The stars, and I quote, were weeping in anguish at the betray that was being less than 5 minutes late. After that whole exchange, I was commanded to take a supplement class after bathing and completing self-study. I wanted to cry at the idea alone, but because my only day off was in fact already booked out with the stupid recovery classes, I only had so much of my day free. So I just didn't get to rest. What made it even worse was the fact that the same horrifically painful pace from last week was kicking in my door and demanding my freaking skin as a sacrifice, and it wasn't like just half the period. No. It was the entire period. Knowledge was shoved down my throat at a rate that was impossible to keep up with, easily overwhelming the weak-willed. Which I happened to be a part of, only, the moment you started crying, the teachers would kick you out and you'd be stuck with a recovery class. So I couldn't even cry. That continued in every class without exception. But something was different other than the teachers being on time, that is. Anyway, they gave out a lot of sugar cube wannabes and things too big to be pills, but too small to be a snack of any sort. I, obviously, was skeptical first period. You think I'm just gonna let these people, whom I don't know, possibly drug me? No. Nah. Screw that. However, I did waver upon third period. What could they possibly do to me that was worse than the torture they thought was teaching? By the time fourth period rolled around, it was as if I wasn't heavily sleep-deprived nor profoundly overworked. I then started shoving it in my face without shame. The small cubes no longer the end joint of my thumb and just as wide tasted like vomit. I'm talking, I just had a big glass of milk and for no reason ate exactly 15 oranges vomit. But it was left out in the sun and dried only to be compressed into this small horrendous cube. Whereas the small eye-sized bites certainly reminded me of an eye in more than one way. It popped in your mouth if you were stupid enough to bite it. And trust me, you'll wish it damn well didn't. With the consistency of thick ink and taste of 10-year-old mold, you'll be lucky if you can keep it down the second time, let alone the first. Still, even with the issues that had me wanting to cut out my tongue, I still took as many as I was allowed to. I learned very quickly how to swallow the squishy orbs without popping them, and to stick my tongue out when eating the small cubes. Don't be shy, shove that down your throat. It's better to gag being overly cautious than to taste it. Trust me. I can't even count how many times I vomited, be it the cruel blessings, or the physical classes pushing me until I did just that. I will say, the mishaps with the repulsive creations had their actual food seem like child's play. Other than that and the stress of dodging the other students when racing between classes, I'd say it went quite well. As if, even with the buffs, I had hardly kept up in my academic classes, let alone the physical ones. I had been trampled twice, learned that barfing can be worse, became the healer's most frequent visitor, figured out I definitely did not have a defense shield, drifted off in self-study, and was punished for it. Had to extend my supplement class, because I was a fool to fall asleep in self-study, was forced to take a shower that was either scalding hot or freezing cold, and worst of all, I got impaled in thaumaturgy which, for your information, was just a fancy word for magic. This is worse than torture. How the blazon is this considered a place for learning? It's kill or be killed out here. Chapter 8. This is where I'll die. I won't ever see war. I'll just die from overexhaustion or, hey, maybe even shock. I could get impaled again. Maybe shot. Who knows? Shoving my breakfast into my face, manners meaningless, I raced out of the cafeteria just before the stampede showed. Fearing supplement classes twice, as much as being crushed to death, I shoved my way through the crowd of people who, almost always, were bigger than me. Getting there in time, bag intact and digging into my shoulder, my refusal to take the time to go to my locker between classes definitely coming back to bite me. Even so, I persisted. The teachers showed up on time and those that had gotten used to being late getting chewed out mercilessly. Class sweeping by as fast as ever, the cruel pace that I was forced to follow seeming to have sped up. Be it running between my classes to lugging around my bag, I was already overly exhausted by the time I had gotten to my physical classes. So, with my chest already heaving and uniform drenched in sweat, I was left in the very class that had nearly killed me. Literally. I was stabbed right on through. Because that happens when one doesn't have a defense shield. Look, kid, lead or not, you are a rogue. Try fighting like one. And yeah, I get that you don't have a shield to rely on or even decent magic, but the thing about glass is it's sharp. Very sharp. And magic shields don't discriminate against magic. It's all the same to it. So, focus on tactics, get around it or break it. Sneak attack for all I care. Face to face is for illiterate barbarians anyway. The support said, crouching next to me. His lead, a barbarian, smacked him upside the head. Hard. Other than spewing stereotypes, he's not wrong. Magic is magic to a barrier of any kind and you've got a lot of mana. Instead of trying to be something you aren't, try feeling out your own standing. I don't care how you do it, just do it, she sighed, looking down at me unimpressed and waving at the mage, who was patiently waiting with his hands on his hips. Adrian. Stop being lazy and actually participate. You can't get away with just using your shield. She barked while he rolled his eyes and shrugged. All right. Get up. Grunting, I pushed myself onto my feet and looked at the dark bluish-grey drow littered with white spots. Sneak attack, This is a head-to-head situation, and the best suggestion I got was a sneak attack. He just ruffled the back of his head with a sigh. Do me a favor and try not to die. I do not want to have to drag you to the healers again. So he's being considerate. Hooray. No promises, I laughed unsurely. I've been just banging on his barrier all period. Yesterday he had literally pierced my stomach. It wasn't entirely his fault, I suppose. Neither one of us knew that I didn't have even a basic shield. I had figured I had one because I was a lead. But no. I was wrong. Very wrong. With a deep breath, I tried to calm my racing heart and looked at my opponent. I don't know how to get around or break a barrier, and I'm confident he's not going to just let me through it. Which means I need to get in it. But it's not like I can manifest something from within, it'd get caught on the shield. I could try to go underneath, but I don't really know how to do that either. Running my hand over my messily tied hair, I steadied myself. Only one option then. Go. Racing forward, I leaped over the spike with the very same trajectory as yesterday. Same for him. He can't go under, which leaves him with one choice. He's got to open his barrier. Flicking my arm as he sent another, the unshaped shard of glass just bounced off, his shield hugging his magic too tightly. Well. There goes my plan. Your back's wide open, he said calmly, his previous spike growing and splitting while I looked over my shoulder with wide eyes. Sorry about this, he hummed, putting one hand back on his hips, not at all taking me seriously, while I threw my arm back, wall after wall of glass coming between me and the spikes, but they just continued. Shattering my glass without the slightest hint of slowing. Oh, that's not happening again. The ground under my feet rapidly rose as I teetered gently on the new platform. That still got destroyed. Clenching my jaw, I jumped off the tall glass, right for him and his unfair shield, before taking the side of my wrist in my mouth. Why'd I have to get put against an earth mage? Out of all the types I could have gotten, why in the blazon did it have to be the one with brute force? By blood, by bone, I stand alone, be it bane, be it gain, I offer thy vein. I rushed a short chant, drawing the circle on my hand at the same time, before I found the top of his stupid shield. My unblooded palm slamming into it, the simple circle on the back glowing while I hissed. The smell of burning flesh unpleasant, but my own fault. The purple hue under me cracking while I paled. It just cracked. Goodbye, Plan B. Kneeling, his hands falling on the ground, he sent quite the pillar my way. Suddenly very much so taking me seriously. Oh lovely. Slamming into my stomach, and sending me flying. The thing was thankfully not pointed. Coughing and hacking as I curled around my stomach, I cursed, pain radiating through not just my stomach, but my spine as well. Are you done, or will you continue? Why don't you pay attention to your other 50 students and leave me alone? Continue, I moaned, sitting up. Well then, don't go using blood magic, that's not what this class is for. This is a class of true magic, and true magic. I tune him out as I got to my feet. All right, only glass I guess. Hissing as I pulled up my shirt, I saw numerous small red dots, and gently prodded the growing bruise. Wait a second. There's always that. Go. 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 Clapped the impatient support as I grunt and sat back down. Have you decided not to continue? He asked as I fell onto my back, my body heavy and a very prominent metallic taste in the back of my throat. I'm continuing, I mumbled, folding my forearms over my eyes, as a rush of warmth spread through me yet cold began to crawl up my legs. What the foo, he cut himself off to curse under his breath, as a growl found my ears. Guess you can summon in barriers. Good to know. Laughing weakly, I coughed, my eyes steadily getting heavier and body colder. So tired. Chapter 9, I'm up. I shrieked, jolting up as pain ran through me, but I was just pushed back down. Good to see you've dragged yourself from your grave, glared the healer, the same dark bags under his eyes from last time, while I looked around. My eyes fell on the white hedgerow getting healed to my left. Why am I here? It's not like I got stabbed or anything, I sighed and looked at the healer, the fight coming back to me. No, you're right, you only had major internal bleeding. He rolled his eyes while I grunted, shielding my eyes from the bright crystal hanging above the bed. That's where the blood's supposed to be. You're very wrong, and I'd have preferred if you had been stabbed. Stab wounds are easy to heal. This? No. This is annoying and I can't see if I'm done, so I'm stuck here until you're for sure healed, he complained while I just rolled my eyes and looked at the seared circle in my hand. I can't fix that, scars are scars, you're sure to get them when using blood magic. I wasn't asking, oh son of a, curling around my stomach, as he whacked it without mercy. I shot him a glare. You supposed to be healing me? I was checking to see if I was done, he smirked, raising both brows, looking very self-satisfied. You that dragon, you made that. Looking to the otherwise occupied Drow, I narrowed my eyes at him. You're a freak of nature. I'd keep that heat in if I were you. And if I did? He raised his brows, not looking at me but rather at the mage healing him, watching his wounds stitch themselves shut one at a time. Wait, how'd he even get cut up so badly anyway? No need to get defensive, your magic is your business. I was just thinking you might want to head to the dean's office when you're done here. After you passed out, the instructors had to step in and retrain that thing. It should be in the dean's office right about now. He smiled slyly at me, giving a side eye I did not trust in the least. Good to know, I nodded, gaining a hum from him. He's not prying. Like, at all. That was a dragon and he doesn't care. Who the blazon is this guy? If I saw someone summon a dragon, I would be full of questions. However, if they just went with a draconic-shaped golem, I would be less impressed. Though it wasn't a popular idea, not in the least, it was possible. More trouble, but possible. And I'm getting sidetracked. He wasn't prying. Which was great, but suspicious. It was a natural reaction after all. But he brushed me off with nothing more than your magic is your businesses. Like? Dude. Plus, elves were curious by nature. Drows were no exception. All right, I'm probably done. Come back if it continues to ache or you vomit blood, he hummed while my gaze snapping to him. The two symptoms vastly different. Until then, get out of my wing, just like that, I was kicked out. I didn't even have the time to open my mouth before the door was being slammed in my face. Rubbing my backside gently, I got up with a sigh. Might as well retrieve the dragon. Grumbling, I began my way to the dean's office, dreading the recovery classes I would have to take. Knocking on the door gently, I waited for permission to enter, but the door simply opened, revealing the Earth Elite and dean to my school. He didn't say anything, just stared at me for a long moment while I stared equally interested at the ground. I've made a mistake. I should have just gone to my room and summoned it. Tame the beast and leave. Nodding, I still didn't look up. In return, he opened the door enough for me to actually step inside. Which I did. It didn't take more than a second for my gaze to fall on the caged dragon, who was thrashing about in its cage. Glancing at the elite, I hesitantly approached. It noticed me when I took the first step, and paused in its raging. The metal bending open and freeing it, without hesitation it leaped into my arms as I readjusted it and turned to leave. My task complete and every fiber in my being wishing to run away. Don't use magic you can't control, he said before another door was shut in my face. What is with the staff here? Do they all just hate me? I mean, come on. I'm not that bad. Am I? Sighing, I looked down at the dragon fast asleep in my arms. You really are shameless, aren't you? Causing a big ruckus then taking a nap, if only I could get away with that. Chapter 10. Lilith Windsor. came a familiar voice, leaving me to freeze all the same. One was bad enough, and he wasn't even mad. Just watching me with a cold interest. This one was pissed. You were told not to use that sinister magic. OOF, I couldn't even run. Rocking on my heels, I held my elbow with a wince. Of course, it had to be the fire elite out of all of them. He made his way over with a rough speed walk, his stomping childish and fuming unnecessary. You will not be using it again, he growled, very much so in my face, while I looked to the teachers, who were suddenly focusing on other students, who were all also suddenly very interested in their fights. Wow. Ouch. Just gonna throw me into Dragon's Den, are you? That's harsh. I just thought. It's magic class, so, you know, it'd be fine. I cringed at the cracking of my voice, his nose practically touching my cheek as he grew closer. His eyes burning with a fiery of no meaning. Like, come on dude, I get that I'm not that good at controlling it, but this is literally the place you go to fix that. I wasn't even sparring. Talk about being dramatic. You are to never use the magic that demon told you of. I'll turn you to ashes if I catch you doing it again, do you hear me? OOF times 2, damn dude. You just had to go and threaten me in front of so many people. Come on, I know you aren't that much older than me, but you still are, and you happen to be an elite. Grow up. I don't need your harassment. I said, did you hear me? How could I not? You are literally in my face. I'll be more careful, I mean, I'm totally not listening to you, but I should at least be shaking in my boots here. I'd normally be running for my life, but more than anything I'm biting my tongue. Mismatched eyes and an accompanying grin danced through my head, a manic laughter bouncing around with the thought of that wild attitude followed soon after. Okay. Well. She's definitely far more frightening, but still, one scary person isn't going to make me immune to every other one. Like, the Earth Elite was still a terrifying person, so why do I just get tantrum vibes every time this bastard opens his mouth? Though, in all honesty, I could live my life without ever meeting her again. She gives me major creeps. His glare lingered before hardening at the yawning dragon purring, as it rubbed against my leg. Holding my snort, the damn thing really the cheekiest creature in existence. I cleared my throat and curled my lips into my mouth in an attempt to hide my smile. This is an elite that just threatened your life. This is an elite that just threatened your life. This is an elite that just threatened your life. This is an elite that just threatened your life. You are and will always only be that of a glass mage. With that, he stomped off. Watching him leave, I continued to stare for a long moment, the smile I had tried to hide unmoving and gaze flat. Woo. So it is true. Fantastic. Did you hear that? I asked, turning my gaze to the dragon, who just rubbed its head against my stomach with a light growl. I agree, I hummed, sliding my hand under its sleek jaw. Why don't we continue? One doesn't get better by standing around. Spikes shot out of its smooth spine and down its long tail, claws jolting from its feet, jagged fangs following just the same. Growling, it bared its teeth and flicked its tail. Yes, I know, I smiled sharply, heat rushing through my arms and hands catching the daggers expectingly, completely ignoring his demands. We'll just have to show him there is no only when describing us. I wasn't allowed to use my Unveils magic in class nor mention it by the next day, so, with my dragon following after me, I took to the library in my spare time. Had to learn it one way or another. Skimming the shelves using my stones as a guide, I sighed, finding no new information. The most I've gotten being from the books Vixen had given me. None of which in a language I knew. Or my professors. Tapping my fingers on the shelf before me, my gaze wandering to the perfect section, I glanced at the librarian. Finding him waking some poor first year, I began my way over silently. Looking around inconspicuously, I reached for the gate only to jump. I wouldn't try that if I were you. My eyes snapped to the drow laying on the ground surrounded by books, one laying over his face, and his hands resting under his head. It's covered in barrier magic, you'd get yourself killed without a shield of your own. He peeked from under the book he wasn't reading. Blinking in surprise, I glanced at the librarian again. Still harassing first years. Oh, I can't get you in if that's what you're thinking. Even with a shield, that level of defense magic just shatters it and you end up in the medical wing slapped with a suspension. How do you get in? I asked, crouching behind one of the large stacks of books. He snorted, returning the book to hide his eyes from the crystals hanging above. Haven't the slightest of clue, only the perfects can go in there. Do I look like a perfect? Only the perfects. So they have some kind of key on them. I wonder what it is. Oh me, oh my, you look like you're plotting. Do share. If you can get in there, I will not hesitate to rat on you unless you tell me how, he smirked. I don't know, but if they get in, then that means it's not completely closed. You can get in with a condition, I sighed, the clanging of metal meeting my ears and my head snapping to the side. My dragon climbing the gate. Or, one could always use magic. It seems it doesn't nullify magic. I grinned while he sat up, lifting his face free of the book. You're walking around with that. Didn't you get chewed out by the fire elite? He asked, not overly interested. Oh, definitely, but I'm not using my magic. It just so happened to have followed me. I didn't do anything. Chapter 11. It's great knowing I can get my dragon in it, but I can't really follow after. Or see. My orders were too complicated, it seemed, so I was left thinking of a solution. How do I see what's happening over that gate? Staring at the dragon, who stared back, I tilted my head and it was quick to mimic me. It was magic. My magic. I had to have some kind of connection to it. I could give orders without saying anything, and sure, it doesn't always listen, but it usually did. Plus I knew what it was saying without it being capable of speech. So, there had to be a connection. One, I was hoping, could let me see what it did. But I knew next to nothing about it, bringing me back to my original problem. The only idea coming to mind, not one I wanted to do. I might get what I want, I might start a war. Who knows? Sighing, I flopped onto my bed and stared at my ceiling. Such a stupid idea. Might as well do it. All right, you stay here for now, I said, rolling onto my feet and giving it a pointed look when it went to follow me. Now, let's steal from the council and talk to an enemy of the kingdoms. Sighing again, I rubbed my face and grabbed my learning lockpick set. Might as well study while I'm at it. Hiding around the corner, I found Miss H and the dean leave his office. No matter how many times you say it, Edward, we can't do anything. He's a dual user, peeking at them in surprise at the mention of a dual user. First vixen, now another one. More than one being alive was like being born with two heads. Not impossible, but sure as hell unlikely. But for that family to have one. And they are pushing something so unrealistic onto us. He sighed, rubbing his eyes and holding the bridge of his nose. She nodded mutely, looking at her paperwork, his attention drifting back to it while they disappeared down the hall and out of sight. That family. Pushing something. I so shouldn't have heard that. Licking my lips, I looked around instead of addressing the curiosity in the back of my mind. Deal with that later. First, I have some crimes to commit. Sliding out from my hiding spot, I rushed to the door and kneeled before it, quickly shimmying the tools inside the lock and struggling to unlock it. I grunted, looking around again. This is why I need a teacher. How am I supposed to know how to be a proper rogue if I don't have someone teaching me? My silent complaining stopped as a click rang through the quiet hall. Then a pair of footsteps. Leaping inside, I quickly closed the door behind me, flicking the lock and looking around. Okay. Clear. Putting my ear to the door, I faintly heard the footsteps pass and grinned. Success. Now to find the communication crystal of public enemy number 1. Looking around the large office, I found a lot of locks on an equal amount of drawers. Well, maybe not a success just yet. Blowing my wildly curly hair out of my face, I glared at another drawer, not having what I needed. Why does he have so many locks? Huffing, I raised my crystal and mumbled the capturing command. I was not opening these for nothing. I could be sleeping right now. But no. He had to have a million locks. Shoving it shut, I forced the lock back on and moved to the next, only to pause and blink in surprise. Was I done? But where was it? Looking around the room, I made sure was the same. As he left it, I scratched the back of my head. What are the chances it's not in here? Gods? I'm gonna be so annoyed if I just did that for nothing. Tapping on his desk, I looked around the office again, this time slower. Shelf after shelf, cabinet after cabinet. Nothing. Don't tell me I have to break into his room. Oh, that'd be the worst. Breaking in here for no reason and capturing highly confidential things, without actually getting what I want, would make me seem like a traitor. Giga. This is stupid. Grumbling, I flipped through his books, having no other place to look. Most of them were boring, a few from the restricted section, and pausing, I pulled the book I was putting back on out. Reaching behind, I furrowed my brows, having heard it for sure. You wouldn't seriously have a hidden door, would you? That'd be so stupid. Finding a string, I let out a long sigh, putting my forehead against the bookshelf in front of me. Pulling it, I waited for the expected room, but instead was greeted with a tile sliding under the one I stood on. All right, you get a pass, Edward. Crouching, honestly done with this whole crime thing and wanting to sleep, I pushed the stuff inside around until I found just what I was looking for. The black sissy stuffing it in my pocket, I frowned lightly at how it didn't really fit. Maybe I should get pouches. Shrugging, I moved to pull the stone back, but glanced at the books stacked teasingly in the little cabinet. Gathering dust. Staring for a long moment, I glanced at the door and grabbed them. Mana pools. Dragon magic. Demon adaptation. Potions. Dual wielders. Magic weapons. Might as well. I can always bring them back later. Pulling the stone tile back in place, I moved to go to the door, but the knob wiggled. Oh, blazin'. My eyes flew around the room as panic set in. I'll be branded a criminal. A traitor. I could be executed. My gaze found the small window at the top of his bookshelf. I was kicking off the chair to my left and climbing the shelf just as the door opened. Well, yeah, she has to participate like everyone else, but she should at least be taught potion brewing. The familiar voice did nothing to stop my sliding free of charges and out the window, though the next thing had me pausing. She'll die out there without a shield and her magic. We need to give every student an equal opportunity. I was the only one in the school without a shield. They were talking about me. It is fair, all schools participate, she wouldn't be the only. But they've been trained properly, by people who don't restrict their magic and teach them how to use it. Oh snap. It is danger. What do you think you're here for? To sit and look pretty. Go, Miss H. Miss Heathersworth, he warned, and she, unfortunately, listened. I will give her brewing opportunities, but I will not be placing her in a third year's class just because you think it's unfair. That alone would be giving the other students a disadvantage, which you seem opposed to. Okay, this is great and all. I love listening to teachers bite each other's heads off, but my arm is starting to hurt. You expect her to know how to brew without instruction? She could. I will also be bringing in one to teach her how to properly study her class. No other privileges will be granted. Oh stars, I'm gonna fall. She could get herself K. We are done here, Council Member Heathersworth, you can't seriously. I can you are excused, now. The dragon summoning circle lit up the wall just as I lost my grip. Letting out a relieved sigh as I fell onto its back, I slumped into the dragon, who wasn't big enough to fly with me, and simply glided to the grassy ground. Throwing my leg off the glossy dragon, I ran my fingers from my elbow to my palms and hooked them, mumbling into my hands. I watched the circle disappear with the dragon. The summoning cancelled and my legs rushing to get me to my room, as unsuspicious as possible. Let's never do this again. Chapter 12. What do you want, kid? I jumped at how she immediately knew it was me. Stars, do you give me the creeps? Well, I was hoping you'd, be able to help me. Learn some languages and maybe about my dragon. I facepalmed at my inability to talk normally. You mean Oxyanibic? I was pretty surprised when you didn't know what it was, but I have a hard time remembering which languages are dead, so that's on me. Not shocking, no one else knew it either, she hummed, far more calm than our last encounter. I don't really have the time to teach brats to read, you know. I've got my hands full. A growl cut her off, yipping and whining following soon after. Goddammit, knock it off, you dumb F, she growled, cutting herself off and leaving me to pale. Bad time. I picked a bad time. Sorry. I didn't know you were busy, just. Look, kid, I'd probably do it if I wasn't busy, purely to screw with those uppity council blue-blooded bastards. But I really do have my hands full, so, just, have these and return this CC to wherever you stole it. A mountain of books dropped into my room without any other explanation, the sheer number having me pale exponentially. Now, I've got to go. No. Wait, sorry, it's just. I was wondering if you could help me with more than just one. I trailed, looking at the book in hand. Capturing it, I sent it, hoping she knew what it was. Layati. Damn kid, what's with you and dead languages? Come on, why bother learning half-baked potions anyway? Opening my mouth to tell her where I had borrowed this from, I was cut off via a new mountain of books. One bigger than the last. There, now you've got everything you could ever need to learn both, and even properly research topics I doubt you have permission to. I also put in a little extra in case you thought to call me again. She hung up. The glowing black crystal dulled while I silently stared at the books covering my room. I couldn't even see my floor. Oh, this is how I die. Groaning, I took a deep breath and looked back to the crystal in hand. Well, she didn't have to help me. Even if she just wanted to get rid of me. My smile faltered as I looked back to the wall-to-wall books that had completely boxed in my bed. A narrow line leading to my door, but nothing else. Looking at the dragon on my bed, I found it sniffing the books before looking at me with a tilted head. Laughing nervously, I looked back at the ones I had put on my bed. I should put back the stolen goods. Yep. The only thing you can do. Unhooking the many crystals hanging from my bedpost, I started capturing the images so I could return the books as well. And maybe put off dealing with the mess. With a deep sigh, I looked over my shoulder at the dragon I could hardly see and began my way back to his office. Far more careful this time too. Thankfully, I didn't have to pick the lock, as it was open, and put everything back to the way I remembered it. Slipping out, I paused, my shoulders sagging and my mind catching up. I should have gone slower. Avoided reality. Sure, tomorrow was my day off, but tomorrow was my day off. I only got one of those a week. One. And I only had half the day this week. And I had planned to sleep through it and maybe go to town for some actually edible food. But no. Now I had to deal with books. So many books. Why did I have to ask for help? Lilith? Dear. Miss H's voice rang through my room with a soft knock. Squinting at the door, I rubbed my eyes, sleep deprivation definitely getting to me. Oh my. You've had your hands full. She made an attempt to smile, but the more she looked around the more she paled. Clearing her throat, she picked up one of the books, obviously about to try and connect with me or something, only to pause. My attention returning to the book in my hands, not bothering to worry over what she read. It was in Layati. There was nothing to worry about. With a flash of mild confusion, her brows furrowed and a frown pulled at her lips. Understanding it about as well as I did. This is Layati, I deadpanned, turning the page of my current book. My ability just above greetings. And telling them apart. Putting my bookmark in, I snapped it shut and dropped it on the stack I was working through with a stretch. We haven't got many of these on the shelves. Have you cleared out the library? She laughed lightly, my attention on the bitter tar classified as liquid. Tossing it back, I missed the sweetness of coffee and ruffled my wildly curled mane before getting to my feet. No, I had a friend send them, I yawned, not insane enough to collect more books. No matter how useful they were, black slush didn't completely fix one's fatigue. Well, consider me impressed. I didn't know you were aware of the name, let alone someone with such a collection of books in the language. Yeah. The walking weapon vixen was pretty chill and gave me millions of books because I happened to have gotten overly curious. I swear, I'll be learning how to bite my tongue from now on. Chapter 13. You know how long it took me until I could understand and find what I wanted. A month. A month. I mean, it felt like longer, but at the same time, if I actually think about it, that is an insanely short amount of time. I obviously am still snail slow when trying to read in it, but I could read it. In a month. Honestly, I've learned I may actually hate reading rather than like it, but I can't stop thinking about it. A month. What kind of dragon's hit is that? The more I think about it, the more unrealistic this month has been. I'm learning fast. Too fast. Staring at the black orb between my fingers, I gave it a small squish. It obediently moved, not resisting in the slightest. Turning my narrowed gaze to the cubes no bigger than a sugar cube, I did the same thing. This time it crumbled into nothing but a mess. These had to be the culprit. There was nothing else. Even the meals consisted of this cubed blazon, but in a more torturous size. Lilith, class has begun, came an unsure voice, making me blink in surprise and quickly shove it into my mouth. Bad decision. Hacking, as you can't just swallow them whole. With so many, I choked them down while being watched by my professor. Lovely. Coughing, I beat my chest and cleared my throat. Sorry, can I die here? Like right now would be great. It's all right. I was actually going to ask you to do a few things anyway. Oh, come on. This is the one class I can be considered average at. Don't push me. I'll lose the very fragile self-esteem I have left. Oh? Don't panic. It's just a few drills I thought you'd be capable of because you happen to be one of the more agile in class. He raised his arms with a strained smile. I'll do my best. I sighed and grabbed a bow with its matching quiver. Strapping it to my thigh with sagging shoulders, I looked at him for instructions. I can't do the drill if I'm not told what it is. 2 drills is all, just showing the class how a rogue moves. Oh, I see. Great. I'm the perfect example of that, aren't I? Because I can do rogue things. Like a rogue. Totally. The first is completely up to you on how you want to do it. All I ask is that you clear that rock and hit the target. He nodded at the mound of dirt that is a new addition to the field we practice in. I probably should have noticed that. And those standing not far from it. Oh geez. Okay. Well then. Nothing to lose but my dignity, I guess. Pausing my examination of the mount, I met a familiar gaze. Miss H. Oh, don't tell me. Looking at my uncomfortable professor trying his best to talk about why they were watching me do something so ridiculous, I couldn't help but sigh. He was doing as a superior asked. She was worried I was getting left behind. In the one class I was average at. Gods? Whatever, let's just get it done and over with. Can I go around? I asked over my shoulder, making him pause, startled by the simple idea. No. That would defeat the purpose. But who's going to just fly over a rock when they can go around? Even talking about the element of surprise using the rock as cover would work just as well, and not tell others where you are at the same time as not leaving yourself exposed. This is a stupid drill. All right, I sighed yet again, not voicing my complaints. Looking it over again, I grumbled, grinding my foot into the dirt and measuring how many steps it would take without moving from my spot. It wasn't any higher than my chest, so it wasn't going to be difficult to get over, but it wasn't exactly going to be easy either. Pulling an arrow from my quiver, adjusting my hold on the bow, I ground the ball of my foot into the dirt and sprinted as fast as I could. With a leap, I turned my body, already pulling my arms up. The moment my feet touched the ground, I was bouncing into my stance and notching my arrow. The arrow lodged itself into the target just outside the center, a yawn unconsciously falling from my lips, the lack of sleep catching up despite the situation. Looking at my professor half-heartedly, wanting to get this over with, I found him blinking in surprise. Love to see your support, thanks. His support, already speaking with the students about how a rogue's surprise attack was dangerous, and their flexibility just making it all the worse. Listening, this still being class, I waited until the attention was shifted back to the lead in charge. He jolted, remembering he was supposed to be doing things, and manifested 5 discs. My gaze hardened as he moved to look at me. "Cause that's fair. Next, a rogue's speed. Wait, whoa, hold up, you aren't suggesting what I think you are, right? I'm decent at speed shooting, but I ain't that good. Lilith, if you will." He nodded, all in position to be thrown. Biting my tongue, I ruffled the back of my head, almost getting my hand caught in my hair, and pulled 5 arrows. Adjusting them in my hand properly, because I cannot pull them from my quiver that quickly, I gave a nod. They were flying in seconds and I was dying inside. With each arrow, I was already pulling another one. No rest was given to my poor arms until all were gone. All hitting their mark, but only 3 breaking. Even without perfect aim, their speed allows an increased level of lethality. Take Lilith for example. She's a rogue with very little training as such and was still able to hit each of her marks with a level of accuracy that could easily leave an arrow in an enemy's eye. Add her speed and mobility, and you have a very dangerous foe. Thankfully, not all rogues are well versed in actual battle and stick to stealth, as they are better suited for such things. He patted me on the back, his lead investigating the discs in disbelief. Lilith is a special case, as she's a lead classified under rogue. Considering how she proves it possible, it is best to be prepared for everything. They don't even need to fall under the lead type to pose a threat like hers. A well-versed rogue, though not commonly strong, can put any fighter, warrior, or knight in the ground for good. Only, they'll take your sword first. I couldn't help but snort at the joke. Turning away from the gazes that were quick to find me, as I was the only one to laugh, the joke honestly only funny because I could see myself taking one's sword while in a fight. I found the dean watching from his window. Not concerned but certainly curious. "When are you going to give me that key as promised? I can't exactly practice potions in the woods, can I?" "Actually." Chapter 14 again. I grunted, the failure being moved away from my face and my eyes finding the recipe. "Grave soil. Not graveyard soil. Gods, why do they have to be so picky about it? I don't want to be the creep taking grave soil. It was bad enough going to a graveyard for soil." The dragon beside me pawed at the large orb roughly the size of my head, which was full of failures. I sighed and took it, easily opening the sphere and dumping the latest into the batch, closing it just as easily. I rolled it to the dragon, shrilling it, just chased after it and tripped, rolling around it. I can't even get most of the ingredients, and those I read wrong half the time. I'm being serious when I say I can't get them too. It ranged from a liar's tongue to the breath of a dragon. Things no living person could collect. Griffin feathers. No thanks, I ain't dying like that. Dragon's scale. No, I don't have a death wish. Vampire blood. I'm not gonna be that weirdo. Werewolf fur. I'm not gonna know. One thing after another, I'd either die, or get reported before I could ever get my hands on it. Sighing, I leaned back on the tree, rolling my shoulder with a moan. Hand to hand was not kind today. I was pitted against a half-orc, who was like super nice, but it was not a situation where I wasn't going to get beat into the ground. And I mean, he helped me up every time he did it only. I think that just made it worse. Stretching, I looked at my book again, and brought one of my many crystals to my lips. Whispering the spell and reminder, I kissed it. Dropping it, it bounced lightly on its string while I got to my feet with a pop of everything. Shivering, most of my joints having just popped, I collected my stuff and slid them into the bag Dad finally sent. Space magic is honestly a lifesaver. I don't think I could continue to drag everything around if it meant losing all feeling in my arm. Looking at the large orb being gnawed on by the dragon, I looked at my bag. Not happening. Taking it with a little resistance, I just split the glass into a few smaller orbs. All still bigger than my hand, but hey, it was easier to carry them. Bouncing to a jog, I easily raced out of the forest I had grown used to in the last 2 weeks. I was originally only going to hide in the tree line, but then, a thought had crossed my mind. The tournament's going to take place here this year. Where would there be enough space for so many students? Anyway, having released that, I started going deeper into it every day. Which is great, usually, but today I still had self-study. As in, I was too deep and terrified I would miss it and have to do a recovery class. They were blazing. No, they were like the bloody pit. Kicking off a tree, I easily got over a log and glanced at the dragon, who was keeping up well. Either way, I did learn something fun in my last recovery class, which was the worst. Potions don't count towards your grades or extracurricular if you don't have supervision or a special little key. Which I should have. But still don't. I was told one thing, that it proves you made it yourself, but you can easily figure out it was because leads don't make potions. They are worried you'll screw up and blow up a building or something. But, to be fair, nothing's really a lead thing other than to take charge and bark orders. They are good at that. Holding my snort as my boots found the cobblestone, I slowed my jog to a stroll. Readjusting my grip on the 4 spheres, I looked to my dragon, just before turning the corner. Finding it there, I looked forward. And ran right into someone. Stumbling lightly, I reached for the orb that slipped from my arms only to pale, as all I did was hit it further away. Watching in horror, not knowing how it'd react, I let out a breath of relief when the dragon leaped around it. Rolling to a stop, it looked up at me, the orb hugged to its chest. Thank the stars it bit it. The dragon bit the orb, breaking it in its jaws with ease. Before I knew what was happening, the sky was lit in flames, and I was set flying with the 2 I bumped into. The orbs in my hands flew free and shattered all the same, the only difference was the wall of metal between us and them. Hissing, I held my head, everything spinning and a ringing pounding on the inside of my ears. Looking around, I found people rushing over, their mouths moving but no sound coming out. Moving to sit up, I whimpered as everything in me protested, the last thing I remember being the familiar earth mage above me shouting something rather muffled. Chapter 15. For the love of glaring at the normal face, I got one right back. Weaker than usual, but holding the routine irritation. Rubbing my head, I tried to remember why I was waking up here this time. The image of that idiot of a dragon flashing in my mind and making me sigh. Right? That? I don't know how you do it, but you always, without fail, pull through, He shook his head while I rolled my shoulders, gauging how bad it was. Someone has to make sure you're doing your job. I hummed with a slanted smile, opening and closing my hands, his grip on my arm tightening, but the usual bite nowhere to be found. He was being nice. Why? You've got severe scarring this time. I didn't think you'd actually have the gall to wake up. Blinking in surprise, I covered my mouth in mock awe. Don't look at me like that, shut up. I wasn't worried about you, I was worried about what your visitors would do to me if you didn't wake up. Looking behind him, I found I did indeed have visitors. Waiting outside, but not at all hiding. That's half the council. Why are they? Oh sure, I blew up the building. I shouldn't have been harassing others in my mind. This is totally on me. You don't look shocked, he stated flatly, releasing me and writing in my personal medical book. Got one of those a week into school. Makes me feel special. Come back if blisters and peeling of the skin continue. I'd say pain too, but with the severity of your burns, I doubt you'd feel much of it. If dizziness and nausea becomes present, immediately seek assistance and report to me. If you have shortness or difficulty breathing, same thing, report to me. In the instance of a fever, immediately seek assistance and report to me. He droned on half-heartedly while I just raised my brows in surprise. This is the longest list so far. One more thing, if I ever have to perform surgery on you before healing again, you will not be allowed in my medical wing, he said sharply, making me jump. Surgery? As in cutting one open? Now get out. Whoa, hey, can't you at least let me see a mirror? You're making me think my face melted off over here, I asked, looking him up and down suspiciously. He paused in his rushing me out with a sigh. You only have light scarring to the head and face, your arm, stomach, side, and back, however, have severe scarring. He then shut the door in my face. Blinking, I stared at the door for a long moment before glaring. You just explained it. You didn't even do a good job. I called, not bothering to open the door knowing that would not turn out well. With a huff, I turned to leave, but was reminded of the council. Right next to me. Oh, sweet sugar plum. What brings you here? Kill me now. Lilith, we are here to talk about what happened, oh gods. I was going to get expelled. No, I was going to get executed. I can't say I liked this place, but damn, I was going to miss it. Farewell, cruel world. Oh, don't get me wrong. You aren't in trouble. We were already told about the situation. We know it was an accident. We would just like to get your side and see if we can't learn a little about those potions you used. I'm not dying. Seriously. Seriously. Why don't we talk somewhere a little more privately? The dean said while I stared at Miss H in bewilderment. I was getting off scot-free. I mean, it was an accident, but come on, what kind of dragon's hit is this? No punishment. At all. That would be best, nodded the water elite, the fire elite just glaring at me. Just like that, I was guided through the halls by 4 elites. Where everyone could see. Kill me. Meeting the gaze of a familiar drow, I watched him do a double take and raise both brows only to burst into poorly hidden laughter. My already red face just dyed in the wild red of my hair without a second's delay. Why is he even laughing? Is it my face? The medical wing's default uniform. The fact I got in trouble. Why is he laughing? What did I even look like? He said back, arm, side, and stomach, plus I remember having my arm outreached before it exploded, so I've got a vague idea of what got burned, but he said light scarring to the face. Not to mention surgery. What's up with that? Isn't that illegal? Miss Windsor, we just want to ask about those potions. Looking up at the water elite, having spaced out, and not even realizing we had gotten here. I glanced at Miss H immediately. Where you got it? The cold and calculating gaze of the dean drilled into me while his burly arms crossed over his chest. She just stayed silent, glancing at him, while I knitted my fingers together and looked at them. One hand not like the other. The color uneven, blending between red, pink, and my usual tan replaced with a sickly pale that ran in uneven lines. Small dips and dives leaving the nearly white lines more visible. It looked just between. I tried to write on myself with a stick too roughly, red patches, and scales. Is this all over me? Geez, just imagine having to explain how I got them. What did you do? Blew up myself, a handful of schoolmates, and a building. That doesn't actually sound as bad as I thought it would. Lilith, snapping out of it, the soft voice encouraging, I was reminded once more where I was and what I did. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but I'd appreciate it if you did. She took my linked fingers and pulled them into her hands. We are just a little curious about if, maybe, you brewed them or bought them from another student, or even someone else entirely. I didn't say anything and she hummed, squeezing my hands, and spoke once more. Did you get them from another student? No, I looked away from her, suddenly aware of just how dangerous this situation was. They said I wasn't in trouble, but that was a ridiculous notion. Of course, I was. Even if I wasn't now, I will be when I explain that I brewed them myself in the forest without supervision, with the ingredients I collected. All right, do you know who brewed them? She smiled, those around us just leaving her to coax out the information. I do. Can you tell me who it was? My gaze wavered again, as I looked to the floor before looking back up at her comforting stare. Should I tell her? I could get expelled. Executed even. I did, peeking up at her when she jumped in shock. I found a heavily startled expression. Can you repeat that? I don't think I heard right. I brewed them, technically. They were just mixed failures, so I can't say it was my goal. You brewed them? She smiled, licking her lips and glancing at her co-workers. Where is it you brewed them? Forest. I muttered, not sure if students were allowed in it to begin with. It was where the tournament was going to be this year, so it wouldn't be shocking if I wasn't allowed to be there. Or if I wasn't supposed to know that. You brewed those potions? In the forest? She asked quietly, more to herself, before smiling at me. Is that so? Well, here I thought you were best in magic, seems I assumed wrong. You excel the most in potions. Do you mind telling me where you learned how? My gaze snapped up in a second and my spine stilled. That was the thing. I didn't learn. I just mixed a bunch of failed batches because it was convenient. It's all right, you don't have to tell me if you don't want to. She jumped in at my reaction, rubbing my shoulders in what should have been a soothing manner, but only put me on edge more. I didn't really make it on purpose or anything. I mumbled, fiddling with the strap on my bag. It's best to get it out in the open now, I guess. Opening the leather bag, I pulled out the book I had been using. I was just trying to do one in my book. Raising the book, I didn't protest when she gently took it. This is the ancient language, no one speaks it, Lilith, she said slowly, looking up from the open book in her grasp before silently passing it to the dean. I can't really speak it, but I can. I can read it. I rubbed the back of my neck, gaze wondering for something to latch onto that wasn't her face, already knowing it was a dead language. In my search, I looked at the others. And regretted it. Automatically. You can read the ancient language. The shock and suspicion in the fire elite voice had spiders crawling up my spine. Paling, I yanked my notebook from my bag and quickly hid behind it. And right, I squeaked, not feeling like dying, but definitely knowing he was willing to ignore that. In all but a moment it was gently pulled from my grip, my shield taken and gaze returning to the floor. Ignoring the burning gazes. Do you mind telling me how you learned it? She asked quietly. Carefully. Stars almighty. How do I answer that? I have books that teach one how to translate Layata to Oxyambic. I murmured slowly, looking back at her face, which was pale. Very pale. I said the wrong thing. I'm going to die here. No, 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 it's all right. Everything's all right. It's better than all right. You know not only the ancient language and its name, but the language between that of the gods and their servants. That's... She trailed, looking to the other council members, and rolled her wrist before taking a deep breath. Whoa, 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 hey, you brushed it off. You even knew I had Audiobooks. You don't get to be shocked by this. How is it you know the holy language again? She asked, her strained voice many octaves higher than the usual calm and comforting one I was used to. Whatever, I've already got their attention. I have books that translate Tibetan to Layati. I half crossed my arms, half hugged myself. Or, yes, she swallowed, like she had forgotten how to breathe, and once again looked to those around us for assistance, but received none. A language the Windsor still speak. I see tradition has done your family well, she nodded, curling her lips in her mouth. Actually, not to add anything to your plate or anything, but my father doesn't speak it and my grandmother has already passed. I had honestly thought it was lucky I already knew Tibetan, as I doubt she would have done anything but give me a new language to learn. If that at all. Ha, even better. She wheezed, rubbing her brow, and the Windsor is one of the few families that partakes in an only child custom, leaving you the only living person to know Tibetan. Statistically, that is wrong, but I don't think I should say that. I feel like that would make it worse. Especially considering she was processing the fact I learned 2 different dead languages because of it. Do I console her? I feel like I should. Actually, they don't seem all that shocked by my fast learning. Just what I learned. Is my theory on their supplements right? If so, this is revolutionary. Why is it not well known? Do they fear the empire getting hold of this knowledge? Perhaps pride as the top lead school. They could be run out of business if others became aware. Oh, but what if? Lilith, dear, how many languages do you know? She asked, pulling me from my thoughts before they could properly form. Not able to hold my whistle, my brows bounced to my hairline, and I started to count on my fingers. 5 if you don't include the one I'm learning in class. I jumped at the strangled noise that left her mouth and met her bewildered gaze, startled by her reaction. What? What was that? And what would they be? She asked, like she did not just make that sound, and I looked her up and down, very unsure if I should answer that question given her response to everything else. The common tongue, Tibetan, Layati, Oxyambic, and Strassesh. I nearly called it Death's tongue. Of course, the language of the damned, because you need to know that, because anyone needs to know that. Cutting herself off, she rubbed both her temples and took multiple deep breaths. Putting her hand up to stop the water elite, who was finally going to help her, she gave me a very strained smile. I made the wrong choice. And how was it you learned that one? Another book. My father chose to learn Strassesh over Tibetan, and in turn, taught me as is. Hex tradition. She cut me off with a grunt. Right. I had nearly forgotten your grandfather was a hex, wasn't he? I nodded, rubbing my neck again, impressed by just how informed she was. Just so we are clear, your father, a Windsor, chose to learn the necromancer's tongue over the language of the cursed, then proceed to teach you while you still learn the other via your grandmother, which you then used to learn not 1, but 2 dead and very ancient languages, one of which belongs to the gods. Yeah, I should have just kept my mouth shut. I really need to learn how to do that. Necromancy wasn't illegal when he was given the choice. If you enjoyed this video and crave more magic and adventure, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Who knows, in the next video, Lilith might just summon a real dragon. Or at the very least, some more glass magic.